Hello, and welcome to Pollinator Partnerships, Monarch Habitat Management and Technical Training webinar series. This series is an extension of the Monarch Wings Across Eastern Broadleaf Forest program and is made possible with the support of the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and in partnership with multiple agencies and organizations. I'm your host, Elizabeth Kaufman, and I'm thrilled to welcome Pete Berthelsen, whose presentation will cover Monarch and Pollinator habitat design. Pete holds both a Bachelor and Master of Science in Wildlife Science and is currently the president of Conservation Blueprint. He is also the partnership director of the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund. Prior to this, Pete worked with Pheasants Forever from 1991 to 2017 in multiple capacities. He has also worked with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in North Dakota, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, and the U.S. Forest Service in Michigan. Pete also serves on numerous steering committees and is the recipient of multiple awards and recognitions, including those presented by the American Beekeeping Federation, the North American Pollinator Protection Campaign, and the National Association of Conservation Districts. Welcome, Pete, and thanks for joining us.
I'll just kind of jump right into the presentation that we're going to talk about today, and it's about the different factors that if you want to do a pollinator project that you really need to consider on the front end. But before we get started, I want to give just a smidge more of a background about myself. This is a photo of my lovely wife and I as we're conducting a prescribed burn on our native prairie. We have a farm that is in the middle of Nebraska in what's called the beautiful Loess Hills, a rolling topography on the landscape that's divided almost evenly between rangeland and row crop production. And we're able to use our farm as a little bit of an outdoor laboratory to demonstrate and document different habitat efforts. I am an amateur beekeeper. I'm a wildlife biologist, as Elizabeth mentioned, but really what I am at my core is somebody that's really interested in establishing, designing, and managing high-quality pollinator habitat. So that's what we're going to chat about a little bit on today's webinar. So I think that we have a pretty broad audience on the webinar that's comprised of a wide range of landowners to resource professionals to farmers to people that are just enthusiastic about pollinators. So that's a really wide range of experience and objectives, but we're going to cover many of those different interests today with what we're going to talk about, because I think that this thing we call pollinators and pollinator habitat is a really unique kind of glue that binds all of those interests. So also before I get started, I kind of wanted to give you three foundational thoughts that really guide the different things we're going to hear about today. And the first one is that when we're fortunate enough to get an acre of wildlife habitat, pollinator habitat, we need to make it the best that it can be, because there's a real lack of great habitat on the landscape. So when we're fortunate to get some, it needs to be the best it can be. The second thought that I come to this with is if we try to solve pollinator problems using the same solutions that we've been using for the last decade, we're not going to get it done. And I think a great example of that is monarch butterflies and monarch butterfly populations. We have to look at pollinator habitat a little bit differently. And the last kind of foundational thought that I have that forms the things I'll talk about today is that not all pollinator habitat is created equal. And so with that, we're going to kind of jump into some things and chat a little bit about the art and science of designing pollinator habitat. And I like to say that the most important part of this is thinking about the different factors that you have for your project before you start. So as a wildlife professional that designs pollinator seed mixtures, there's all kinds of things that I need to know. I call them key factors. I need to hear from you, the landowner, the project manager, about these many different things before I could ever design a seed mixture to benefit pollinators. We're going to talk about each of these factors, but geography is one. Where are you located in the country? Whether you're a private landowner or a corporation, all projects have a budget. What's your budget? That's a factor that would influence it. How are you going to plant the pollinator habitat? What's the pollinator value of what you're planting? What kind of soil are you doing this project on? What kind of site preparation? Those are 6 really key factors that have to be determined, but there's also more than 6. In addition to those 6 really important ones, there's things like, what kind of pollinator species do you want to benefit? How are you going to manage it in the future? Are we thinking about this like a prairie restoration project? What kind of weed history do you have on the site? These are all things that have to be decided before a seed mixture can be determined. So let's kind of talk about those factors a little bit. So the first one I want to talk about is pollinator value. One of the things that I said is that not all pollinator habitat is created equal, and that's really the case. So the first thing that I want you to consider is that more things, more diversity means higher pollinator value. And for this graph that I'm showing right here, don't worry about the plant species names and that sort of thing. What I want you to take from this slide is the reality that the more plant species that you include in your seed mixture, the more pollinator species you benefit. More plant species, more pollinator value. The other important component to pollinator value is that your seed mixture needs to be designed in a way that will factor that in. Here's another example of where don't worry too much about your ability to read what this says. That's not the point. My point is that your seed mixture should always be designed using something like a seed calculator that shows you the planting rate of each species, how many seeds per square foot each species will be in there, but then also a critical value of where each plant species in your mixture is assigned a pollinator value. In this case, from 1 to 5, because not all plant species provide the same level of pollinator value. So one of the things that happens with a good seed calculator is that when you're done, it tells you all kinds of really important information about how much grass is in there, what's your seeds per square foot seeding rate, what bloom period are they flowering in, and the cost. But also, it's going to give you that really critical information of a pollinator value score. And if you're not doing something like that, you may be using a pollinator seed mixture that doesn't give you as much bang for the buck as what you're hoping for. So our next factor is geography. This means, where do you live? And in this example right here, we have a plant species in here that's called Antisum, and it is a phenomenal pollinator plant. Bees love it, butterflies love it. If you're an insect looking for nectar and pollen, you love this plant. But when we look at where this plant is located, it's found, relatively speaking, in a pretty small area of the country. So if you are looking to create a pollinator project in Ohio or Texas or North Carolina, this would not be a species that you would use in your pollinator seed mixture. So geography, where you're located, is a really important factor. The next important factor that I wanted to talk about is the cost. Every project has a budget. whether you're a private landowner or a corporation. And we often hear about seed mixtures that cost from $100 to $600 or more per acre. Well, I'm here to tell you that I think great pollinator seed mixtures can be designed that don't have to cost lots of money. And the example that I want to give you is I want to show you two pollinator plant species. The first one is showy partridge pea. It's found over a wide range of the eastern part of the country, and it is one of the least expensive pollinator plant species out there when you're looking at a cost per pound. Next, I want to look at another really important pollinator plant species called Slender Beardstongue, found in much of the same area. A bloom period 1 plant, really important to bumblebees, but it is one of the most expensive pollinator plant species out there. And what I want to show you today is that don't look at the price per pound to make your decision about what species you want to have in a mixture. And here's why. Let's compare the least expensive pollinator plant species next to the most expensive one. Showy partridge pea next to Slender Beardstongue. We know their price. The next bit of information is that for showy partridge pea, it takes 43,000 seeds to make a pound of seed. And for Slender Beardstongue, it takes 10.8 million seeds to make a pound. So if you wanted to design a seeding rate where you had 1 plant per 4 square feet, which can be an appropriate seeding rate if you're using a pollinator seeding mixture that has 40, 50, 60 different species in it. The least expensive pollinator plant out there costs $3.40 an acre. That's not a bad price, but the most expensive one, when you have the exact same seeding rate, costs less. Don't let the price per pound scare you off of how your seed mixture is designed when your seed mixture is designed based on the number of seeds per square foot. The next thing that we'll chat about a little bit is how are you going to plant it? And broadcast seeding is one of the options that can work for you, whether you're using a seed slinger like we just showed or a granular applicator like we're showing right here. The real key to broadcast seeding is that you have to have great seed to soil contact. If the seed does not contact soil, if you have a lot of residue in this field, that will negatively affect your germination and your establishment of your stand. So we have to have great seed soil contact. The other method for broadcast seeding is the old Johnny Appleseed method, which you can use. So that's broadcast seeding. And when we have great seed soil contact during the first year, this might well be what your pollinator planting looks like when we're looking down at the ground. But when we examine this closer, in 1 square foot of ground, there's all kinds of new pollinator plant seedlings that are coming up in this area. And that's what we get when we have great seed soil contact. In areas where we don't have great seed soil contact, and maybe crop stubble or going into existing grass can be one of those examples, we want to use something like a no-till drill. A no-till drill increases the amount of seed soil contact that you're going to have. Soil type is a really important factor. Whether your site is on sandy ground, loamy ground, clay ground, different plant species will grow in different areas. And those are the plant species that we want to design your pollinator project with to fit its happy home based on the soil type. Another consideration is, are we planting into crop stubble or are we going into something that's never been farmed? Generally speaking, great pollinator habitat results come from going and planting into existing crop stubble. The reason is most of the competition from grasses has been removed through agriculture. There's one really important consideration to think about when we're planting into crop stubble, and that is what herbicides were used on that field the previous year. And what I want to caution you about is, if we're going into crop stubble, you need to learn and consider what herbicides were used the previous year, because it can be, in an example like we have highlighted here, that a herbicide that was used last year will have a residual effect and would be doing its job by preventing your pollinator planting from germinating and growing this year. In this herbicide that's highlighted here, it has an 18-month residual. So if it was sprayed on your crop stubble last year, this year it will be doing its job to prevent your pollinator planting from establishing. The next thing that you really want to think about is, what pollinator species do I want to benefit? Could be something like honeybees, could be native bees, could be butterflies, could be everything. How you design your seed mixture will be influenced by what pollinator plant species you want to benefit. If you were to say, I want to target and mostly benefit honeybees, how you design your seed mixture will be different than how you will design it if you said you wanted to target and primarily benefit monarch butterflies. The next one that you want to think about is, do you want to use only native plants, or can you use things like naturalized forage legumes, clovers, in your seed mixture? With prairie restoration projects, you hold to a much different standard than a project of where maybe you wanted to benefit honeybees. So those are really important factors that will guide how a seed mixture is made. The next one is, I like to call this critter attractiveness, because if you were doing, say this is for a project on the side of a highway, a roadside, you probably wouldn't want to use plant species in your seed mixture that are highly attractive to deer. And the pollinator plant in this photo is called ashy sunflower, Helianthus mollis. And this, to me, is like laying little Snickers bars down, and the deer will be out there and be eating and clipping every one of these flower heads before it blossoms. If attracting deer is a problem and something that you wouldn't want in your project, that will guide and influence how we would design your seed mixture. And then the next thing is future management. What kind of future management are you going to be able to do on your site? Because there's nothing that we can do where we're going to plant pollinator habitat, walk away from it, and it's always going to look good. Follow some more of the Pollinator Partnership's other webinars for specific management about future management options. But what you can and are willing to do for management will also guide how we're going to design your seed mixture. Okay, we're wrapping it up, and I'm going to kind of give you a little summary of this. These are the items that are on your do list. You want to make sure and do this for your pollinator project. Focus as much attention as you can on site preparation. If we ever have a project where 3 years, 5 years into the future, somebody is disappointed with the results they got, it always comes back to site preparation. So never scrimp there, and always do your best work there. Your seed mixture should be built based on the number of seeds per square foot. Talked about that a little bit earlier. No matter which planting method you use, make sure that you're getting great seed to soil contact when you're planting it, and think about that future management. What is going to be the different management options that you have in your toolbox? And then we want to think about weed competition, both in the year you've established it and down the line into the future. Along with those do's, there's a couple of don'ts. Here are some of the things that you want to really make sure that you don't do. The first don't is don't establish grasses in year one and then think you can come back and plant your wildflowers in year two. That's a little bit like me racing Usain Bolt in the 100-yard dash. I'm not going to win. Technically, if he blew a hamstring and fell down, technically I could win, but it's not likely, and it's not going to happen. The next thing that you don't want to do, don't scrimp on site preparation. If it means that you need to put another few months or maybe even a year into getting your site prepared, do it. In the long run, you'll have better results. And the last thing that you don't want to do, don't go forward without defining and really thinking about what your factors are that are going to influence your project. Because when you follow those steps, this is what you can have. And this is a 14-year-old planting that gets a little bit of management every year, was designed properly, and these are the kind of results you can get. And it's probably what most of you on this webinar are really thinking that that's what you want. All right, that's the webinar. I'm wrapping it up, and I want to give a big shout out and thank you to the Pollinator Partnership, the Bee and Butterfly Habitat Fund. Conservation Blueprint has really appreciated the opportunity to give this. I want to let you know that in addition to the resources that the Pollinator Partnership has, we also have monthly pollinator habitat tips that are available. You can sign up to get these free, and I would be happy to take any kind of questions that you have offline of the webinar. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this. This is a subject that I love. I hope you've gotten something out of this today, and I'm going to turn it back to Elizabeth. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pete, for that really informative presentation. And thank you all for your interest. For additional information and to access downloadable materials regarding monarch habitat creation, including ecoregional planting guides, habitat manuals, and additional webinars, please visit us at pollinator.org, where you can find these materials and others housed underneath the Resources tab. Thank you again so much.